right, so everyone's buzzing about this crypto crash. It's definitely got people talking, and maybe even a little uneasy if you're invested.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a wild few days for sure.
Well, we're going to try and break it all down today in this deep dive. We've got some great sources to help us out. We've got some live data from a crypto news website, and we also found this interesting snippet from another crypto podcast discussing the crash. So we're going to try to cut through all the noise and really try to understand what caused this crash, what it could mean for the future of crypto, and, of course, what you should be thinking about if you're invested.
Right, because let's face it, seeing Bitcoin down to like $86,306, that's an 8.9% drop. It's enough to make anyone sweat a little bit, and some of the altcoins are down even more.
Yeah, Ethereum is down more than 10%, and Solana got hit even harder. I mean, those are some pretty big numbers.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're definitely causing some anxiety. But before we just start spiraling here, I'm curious, from what you've seen, is this like just a crypto thing, or is there something bigger at play?
That's a really good question, and it's something both our sources actually highlighted. The Federal Reserve raising interest rates, that has definitely spooked the traditional markets, and as a result, investors are kind of moving away from assets they see as more risky, and that includes crypto.
Ah, so it's like a domino effect. This is interesting because didn't this kind of happen back in 2022 as well?
Yeah, exactly. There are definitely some parallels to the last big downturn, but this time we also have these SEC lawsuits against some major exchanges, and that's throwing another wrench into things.
Oh, right. Those lawsuits. I remember hearing about them, but I haven't really dug in too much. How are they adding fuel to the fire?
Well, they're creating a ton of uncertainty in the market, and uncertainty always makes investors nervous. Remember all the hype around Bitcoin ETFs? Well, if approvals get delayed, or even scrapped because of these regulatory roadblocks, then a lot of investors are probably going to get cold feet.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if that whole ETF thing was just hype to drive up the market in the first place. Yeah. Do you think that's playing a role in this extreme fear that the podcast snippet mentioned? That fear and greed index? Sounds kind of intense.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely plays a role. You know, market psychology is a powerful force. And when fear takes over, people tend to make emotional decisions. And that often leads to more selling and even further price drops. And then it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, then social media just amplifies it all. It turns a small ripple into a tsunami of panic. But the podcast also mentioned that experienced investors actually see these dips as buying opportunities.
Absolutely. And this is where understanding leverage becomes really crucial. Over-leveraged traders who got caught in this downturn, they're getting hit with margin calls, and that's forcing them to sell to cover their positions, which is amplifying the crash even further.
Gosh, that's gotta hurt. Speaking of pain, the podcast mentioned something like $2.8 billion in liquidations. That's a lot of money just disappearing. Makes those percentage drops seem a lot more real, you know?
Yeah, it really does. It really underscores just how much leverage can magnify gains and losses in the crypto market. So what stands out to you so far?
Honestly, it's kind of overwhelming just trying to wrap my head around all these factors at play. You've got macroeconomics and regulations, psychology and leverage all swirling around like a crazy cocktail. But I guess the big question on everyone's mind is this just a blip, or are we heading into another crypto winter?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And while the podcast snippet seemed pretty optimistic overall, they did say there's probably going to be some short-term pain. But the interesting thing is, Bitcoin's gone through this kind of roller coaster before. I mean, even 80% drops, and it always seems to bounce back.
Yeah, Bitcoin has been declared dead more times than I can count.
Yeah.
And yet here we are. But what makes everyone think it can rebound from this?
Well, for one thing, the halving event is coming up in about 10 months. And this is when the reward for mining Bitcoin gets cut in half, which basically reduces the rate at which new coins enter the market. And historically, this has often led to price increases.
Oh, so it's like a built-in scarcity mechanism. The less Bitcoin there is, the more valuable it becomes.
Exactly. Plus, we're still seeing growing adoption. More and more businesses are accepting Bitcoin for payments, and they're using it for cross-border transactions. And then there's the institutional interest. Big players like pension funds and investment banks are still dipping their toes in the crypto waters, even with all this volatility.
So the big money isn't running for the hills just yet. That's somewhat reassuring, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are a lot of people out there freaking out right now. So if you're listening to this and feeling that anxiety, what would you say is the best course of action?
First of all, take a deep breath. Panic never leads to good decisions. especially when it comes to investing. The sources we looked at had some good advice, whether you're actively trading or just holding. And that's diversification is key.
Right. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Spread your investments across different asset classes, not just crypto, stocks, bonds, real estate, even precious metals. Having a diverse portfolio can help cushion the blow when one asset takes a hit.
Makes sense. I'm guessing avoiding leverage is probably a good idea too.
Absolutely. Leverage can be tempting, especially when things are going well, but it can also wipe you out when the market turns against you. This crash really exposed the dangers of over-leveraging.
Yeah, and maybe resist the urge to constantly check your portfolio every 5 minutes. That can't be good for your mental health.
You're telling me, focus on the long term. Crypto is a volatile market. It always has been, and there will be ups and downs. Don't get caught up in the day-to-day fluctuations. Bitcoin has survived 80% drops before and come back stronger. Patience is key.
Easy for you to say. You sound so calm and collected. Speaking of staying calm, there's something I found a little unsettling in the sources. All this talk about a Bybit hack and crypto mixers, it sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it? It actually touches on a really important issue that could have huge implications for the future of crypto. So Bybit is a crypto exchange, and it was recently targeted by hackers. And apparently they use these crypto mixers to try and launder the stolen funds.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What exactly are crypto mixers?
Think of them as a way to scramble the trail of cryptocurrency transactions, making it much harder to track where the money came from and where it's going.
So it's all about anonymity.
Right. It can be used for legitimate reasons like enhancing privacy, but it's also become a favorite tool for criminals who are trying to cover their tracks.
That makes sense. And since regulators are already cracking down on exchanges, I'm guessing these crypto mixers are going to be their next target?
Yeah, it seems like it, especially with all this focus on preventing money laundering and illicit activities. It's tricky, isn't it? Crypto is built on this promise of decentralization and privacy, but those same features can be exploited for illegal purposes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a double-edged sword. And I think this Bybit hack could actually accelerate regulatory scrutiny of these crypto mixers. Regulators are walking a tightrope here, trying to balance innovation with the need to protect investors and prevent crime. It reminds me of like the early days of the internet, when everyone was so excited about the possibilities, but nobody really knew how to handle the downsides. Are we heading for a similar situation with crypto? Will regulations eventually catch up and maybe even stifle innovation?
That's a valid concern for sure. Finding that balance is going to be crucial. Too much regulation could definitely stifle growth, but too little could leave the door open for abuse. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Well, one thing's for sure, you've given me a lot to think about today. We've covered a lot of ground, from the crazy price drops to the impact of interest rates, regulatory crackdowns, the psychology of fear and greed, and the dangers of leverage. It's enough to make your head spin.
It is a lot to process, but that's why it's so important to stay informed and try to understand these forces that are at play. Knowledge is power, especially in a volatile market like crypto.
Absolutely. Listening to you strikes me how interconnected everything is. It's not just about Bitcoin or Ethereum in isolation. It's about understanding how crypto fits into this larger picture of global finance technology, even geopolitics.
That's a great observation, and it highlights why it's so important to stay curious and keep learning. This crash is just another chapter in the ongoing story of crypto. There will be more twists and turns, more ups and downs. But one thing that remains constant is the potential for innovation and disruption.
Well said. I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive. Hopefully you're feeling a bit more clear-headed about this recent crypto crash and what it all means.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. We talked about the Bybit hack and the use of crypto mixers to launder stolen funds. But this raises an interesting question. As regulators start to focus more on these services, what are the implications for privacy in the crypto space? Is there a way to balance the need for security with the desire for anonymity? It's a complex issue with no easy answers. It's definitely something worth considering as crypto continues to evolve.
Yeah, that's a great point. It seems like with every step forward in crypto, we just uncover new challenges and questions. But hey, that's what makes it so dynamic and fascinating, right? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.